Welcome to Returning to Soul, a podcast for lawyers and other high achievers seeking deeper meaning, purpose, and fulfillment in their work and lives. My name is Jessie Brown. I practiced law for 15 years before becoming a career coach and purpose guide for lawyers and other high achievers. I also work as a meditation teacher, a sound healer, a breathwork facilitator, and forest bathing guide. And I facilitate retreats in Sedona, Arizona. My next retreat is October 1st through the 4th, and we have a few spots available. So if you're interested, and this retreat is for women, if you're interested, please reach out. So today I have a very special guest, Haley Morrison. And Haley and I connected, I think it was probably a year or so ago on LinkedIn. And she's a former big law attorney turned conscious communication trainer. And I really resonated with Haley's content, especially she has a concept of the radical sabbatical that I want to explore today. So I thought she would be a great guest to introduce to our audience. So thank you, Haley.
Thank you, Jessie. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I would love if we could start just by sharing with our audience a little bit about your early career journey, starting out as a lawyer and anything you'd like to share. I know one thing that we have in common is both of us tried different practice areas to kind of see if we could make law be a good long-term career fit. So I would love if you could share a bit about your experience working as an attorney.
Sure. Well, and the foundation is that I loved law school. I loved the intellectual exploration of law school. So I was really quite optimistic and hopeful that I would have this very rewarding career in the law. And I started off at a firm in Boston where I practiced transactional law. And part of that was because I actually kind of knew I didn't really love litigation. I don't like being in conflict. And people told me, well, in transactional law, even though you're on other sides of a deal, everyone wants the deal to close. So it's more collaborative. And I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds wonderful. And I really didn't enjoy it. And I knew I've got loans to pay off. I need to find a way to keep going. And I was fortunate and I was able to get a clerkship. I clerked at the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. So that brought me down to Washington, D.C., and I was able then to pivot to litigation. And I then went to Gibson Dunn in D.C. And I started off in the labor and employment group, and then I did a little regulatory work, and then I got on a big pro bono case, and then I started doing some soft IP work. So I really tried.
Yes. So this is so interesting to hear. And you were there for 5.5 years, right? At Gibson. Yeah. So that's quite a good amount of time. And hearing all the practice areas you tried, I'm like, wow, we have even more in common. So I started out also labor and employment at a big firm in DC, mostly class action defense and other types of litigation. I also tried I did estate planning for a year, seeing if that could work. I did some transactional work. I did tried advice and counseling, which I did enjoy that with during COVID, helping healthcare employers comply with regulations, but then that work went away. So I was back to doing litigation. And I also did a bit of soft IP. So I heard you, I was like, oh yeah, I did some trademark stuff back in the day. So we have some things in common there. That's interesting. Yeah, so you really tried to make law a fit.
I did really try. And I remember an eye-opening conversation with a close law school friend. She had gone to Big Law and then she was in consulting, or maybe she was in-house by the time we had this conversation. And I just told her, I just feel like I'm constantly struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, that's not how we're supposed to live our lives. And I think by that point, I was so used to the grind that had become normal to me. And it was a big wake up call of well, that's right. That's not how we're meant to live.
That's powerful. I truly believe that because I can resonate with that so much. I remember feeling I don't know about you, but even when my last firm was a pretty good firm, good culture, and gave me a lot of flexibility, but I still had to give myself a serious pep talk every morning, just sit at your desk, just do it, just get through the discovery, just whatever, just work on the brief, just do the research.
Mhm.
And it was so hard and it took so much energy. And I find to me, that is often a symptom of what I call like career misalignment. You know, your strengths, you're not really operating from your strengths, and something's not fitting. So you're trying really hard, and it takes more energy than it might for someone else where it's a better fit for them.
Mm-hmm. And I think for my whole life, I was really oriented towards external validation. I mean, I was always good at school. I always wanted to get the A's. And I was very disconnected from my heart and what really mattered to me because I was really in this place of like what I should do, like what brings. And I recognized actually when I was in the process of like, I'm going to quit, like I did value the status and the prestige of working for a big firm. And I really respect all my colleagues. And that was something I recognized that was, yeah, kind of distorting that alignment for myself.
Me too. I
Mhm.
really resonate with that. Because it felt good to be in an organization like that. And I did also respect my colleagues. And I remember thinking, it can get a little bit confusing, like, well, I'm doing this important work, or this feels, I feel, you said there's something there that, you
Mhm.
know, provided something for a time. And then it sounds like we both came to the realization, like, there's something more for us than just that.
Yeah. And part of um like really letting go when I realized like, okay, it's time time to quit is, I grew up at very middle class and financial security was a big drive for me. And I did see being a lawyer, being a professional as giving me that financial grounding that I so longed for. And it was hard to think I mean never make this kind of money again. And that's okay.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, because I had a similar experience, and I know a lot of our listeners can relate to this. I also grew up very middle class. Most of my life was a single mom. She didn't go to college, so I don't even know I'd say middle class, but a lot of financial struggles. And then my parents both died when I was in college, and I didn't have a financial safety net. So I pivoted. I wanted to be a writer. I was in an MFA program, and I was like, oh, I'm never going to be able to make a living doing this. I have to find a different way. And law was that path. So I really resonate with what you're sharing about. And it did provide financial security and stability for a time, and enabled me to pay off my loans. It's like,
Right.
but, and many other things. I mean, it provided, but there came a time where it's like, isn't there more than just seeking this financial security? Or what am I giving up? What am I trading for this? Yeah. But it can be hard to let it go. I had a similar thought, like I may never earn this amount of money again, and that's okay. Yeah. Wow. It takes courage to let go like that.
It does. And I really felt, well, I guess I shared before and I'll share now about like what helped me really come to that realization of I need to quit. I had just finished a trial. We did post-trial briefing and I had this space and I was like, I know I need to take several weeks off to recover from that. And it just turned out that this yoga teacher, this Kundalini yoga teacher that I've been practicing with for years, she was offering a retreat in India right in the middle of that time. And it was like, oh, that's the thing. And I just said yes to it, paid, I'm going to India. And it really was a spiritual awakening for me. And all of that mind chatter and the worry, it just cleared. It just disappeared. And I really felt anchored in that trust of like, I will be okay no matter what. And I just can't go back to living the way I was living. So it just felt like there wasn't any other way, or just like this is the new way. The new way is not what I've been doing. There has to be a change.
Yeah. That's so powerful. I love that story. And I'm curious for our listeners, would you be willing to share a little bit more about that time in India and like your awakening and some of these insights? It's so powerful.
Sure. Well, it was very intense practice. I mean, we were up like at dawn for, an hour and a half, 2 hour practice, like before breakfast. And there, monkeys are clamoring on like the tin roof of our practice. And so there was just intense practice all day long. And Kundalini yoga is, I guess, different than like flow yoga practices. It's not like hatha. It's quite different. It's really focused. on the energetic body. It's more rooted in spirituality, and so it's quite deep. And I just had just these profound experiences in meditation and shavasana of kind of letting go of the habitual thoughts and patterns. And what also was happening at this time, because I was there March of 2020, news about COVID was starting to filter in. So, we were going from these deep practices, and then, there's a little bit of like this fear starting to seep in of like, wait, what's happening in the world? And I think for some of us, I mean, it encouraged me to like, okay, here's this opportunity to stay present in the now, because I can't control what's happening outside of me, or what's happening in the world at this moment. And I guess it's and hard to describe, but of just feeling that sense of connection with the universe, a sense of trust, like a deep connection of like the oneness that's possible. And I think I realized probably on a kind of soul level how disconnected from myself I had been.
Hmm. It's
And
so,
then I
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Well, and then I got the last flight out of India before India closed its borders because of COVID. So there's kind of this rush at the end of like, oh my God, I have to get out of India. I have to head home. I don't want to get stuck in India. And of course, coming home, like the world had changed overnight. And I knew that Big Law was not going to be in my future. And I didn't quit until later, over a year later. But I used that time to like mentally prepare for like letting go, and for I think working through some of these issues around money of like what's enough?
Hmm.
What is it to like leap into the unknown?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing all of that. It's profound. And I'm curious when you say working through that, what was that like for you? I also did a lot of working through these things, and I'm just so curious to hear your process or your experience.
Well, one thing that was very fortunate coming out of this yoga retreat is I formed a deep connection with two other women, one of whom was already on a break from work, and the other was planning to quit her job. So the three of us continued talking every week for 2 hours on Zoom. And we are still talking almost weekly, like to this day.
Wow.
And so we had these just ongoing conversations first with the woman who was on the verge of quitting. And so she was working through all these questions of what does it mean to leave this job? What will people say? How do I do it? Just looking at the logistics of it. So we had so many conversations, deep conversations, and there was that sense of support with each other. And then the model of the one friend who had already quit and was taking a break from work to really see that was totally possible.
That's incredible to have that support. And it's so deep, it sounds like. And the fact that you guys are still meeting just speaks to like the power of that connection, the connection you
It's
three
been
have.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think that kind of support is so important when you're going through something like what you went through because it can bring up fear, even though it sounds like you experienced, whatever we might use language of the ego being very quiet when you were in India or like letting go of the ego, kind of transcending. But I don't know about you, but I think it's still can creep back up, and we can still have some of that stuff. So to have friends on that path or to have, guides or some type of support while you're going through that is just so helpful to not kind of go back and let the fearful stuff take over.
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to the support, I did kind of maintain a regular meditation and Kundalini practice during that time. So it's like I knew how to, access again that place of stillness, that place of trust. And so I could reconnect with that feeling, that calmness inside myself. So it's something also about like, you have to bring along the nervous system, you have to bring along the body. It can't just be like this mental decision. Or I mean, you can, but the fear, like it lives in us in a way. And so how is it to be integrated in that decision and that confidence of moving forward?
Yes, absolutely. It's really powerful. And I'm curious, you said something just now about you were able to return to this stillness within because you'd cultivated that over years. And, I can relate to that. I learned meditation when I was in law school, but really was not consistent probably till around age 40. I was, would meditate, go on retreats, and then not meditate for a while. And then in my 30s, I had my kids, I moved cross country, I took a second bar exam, like meditation, I wasn't meditating every now and then, but not consistently. And I found for me, returning to a regular meditation practice, I mean, it's still essential for me, but that is what's cultivated that stillness that allows for the clarity. But so many lawyers I talk to, this is my question for you, is somebody who's new, who doesn't have a practice like that yet, and they are living with that chaotic, monkey mind, we might call it, but like, or the, as the Buddhists say, they're living with that and they feel overwhelmed and their emotions and their thoughts, and they really can't get that access, that stillness or that clarity. And they believe, I don't have any time to meditate, or I'm not good at meditate, or whatever they have these thoughts. What would you say to someone in that situation who is seeking that clarity?
I think that kind of an access point for me, what I would suggest is breath work. I think it's so challenging in the stress of the world and these jobs, to then think of a meditation practice where you're just going to sit and quiet the mind. Like it just doesn't happen so easily. And we can also be in struggle against ourselves when we're trying to do that, and it feels like I'm just not getting it. So I think breath work is helpful, is like a way to like bring like an anchor and not just like follow the breath, but in Kundalini yoga there are a number of different like techniques of breath work, of alternate nostril breathing. We do breath of fire, and I think, there are other techniques of, sniffing breaths in through the nose and releasing them out, or the box breath, 4 counts in, hold the breath for 4 counts, 4 counts, exhale, 4 counts, hold the breath out. Doing any of those, even for 3 minutes. In Kundalini Yoga, we say even 3 minutes is enough to start to shift state. It doesn't take very long, but I think that the breath can, in a faster way, help you shift the mind and the body so that you feel it. Because I think having a feeling, having an experience kind of in the body where you can start to really experience that felt sense of peace, that is like the hook to continue doing it.
Wow, I love that. And it really resonates. I think it's gets back to what you were saying earlier about, fear or whatever our life experience, it's in the body. So breath work is a way to somatically kind of release some of this. And I remember as you were talking, I was reminded probably my first experience with that type of breath work. I had done some yoga, but more like flow yoga, and I had been exposed to mindfulness meditation and metta meditation, but I had not really done breath work in the way you're describing until probably 5 years ago. And I was at a retreat, a weekend retreat, where there were different facilitators brought in. So one woman was a breathwork, and it was the holotropic, like circular in, out breathing. And that was my first time having this experience. And I can describe it. It was like something bubbling up from the depths of my being, coming out, and I was sobbing, whole body shaking, sobbing. And I remember I was in a room with maybe 25 women. So I was thinking, oh, I don't want to disturb anybody. I don't want to be too loud. I want to be quiet. And I was trying to control it. But there was such a powerful release. And the woman in front of me at the afterwards, she was like, oh my gosh, like you were releasing a lot. She's like, I could just feel the energy. But I ended up hiring the woman who did the breath work. She is in Vancouver, and I hired her for a Zoom session after that and a few sessions. And I was having these powerful like releases. And I can remember, and I was in the middle of COVID, litigation, raising young kids. My husband's a lawyer, like life was very stressful. And there was a moment during the breathwork session where I didn't even know what was happening, but like my hands just started going like this, and I just started going, I am done. I am done. So kind of similar to what you had, this shift of like, I can't go back to this. I was like, I am done with this. And I didn't even know with what. I was like, my work wasn't that toxic. My marriage was fine, but there was something about this way I was living that I was like,
Wow.
I cannot continue like this.
Wow.
So now I've trained as a breathwork facilitator, and the style I do called elemental rhythm, it incorporates music and different breathing patterns, but it is very active. We have a couple styles, but there are styles that are very meant to activate and, emotional somatic release, that type of experience.
Wow. I also do similar types of those longer sessions, more of like the holotropic breath work, and they're so potent. And I do trust like there's a truth that comes through the body, right? That's like it, right? It's not a creation of the mind. And when we listen, like the body really does want to guide us towards the highest good. There's a deep intelligence in the body, and for me with some of these breathwork, I release. There's so much grief.
Yes.
There's so much sadness because I contained so much of myself for so many years, and even now sometimes I'm like, whoa, there's still stuff. There's still stuff that needs to come up and come out, and I just trust that whatever is coming up, it's the right time and it needs to be released.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And I really feel that too. Because even as I was sharing that, I remembered I found another breathwork teacher in Phoenix where spend most of the year, and I found it to be such a helpful practice. And it's like the body was leading, because then there came a time where there was some quiet. Like I kept doing it, and I was like, oh, there's not as much, but still stuff comes up, and you go deeper. And but it was sort of an intense, like about a year time of a lot of grief, as you said. I experienced a lot of, and I'm curious for you, I find some people, maybe, I don't know if you felt this way, there can be some fear about like allowing those emotions to come up and release, even though I do think it's the path to freedom. But it can be like, can I handle these emotions? Or is it going to overwhelm me? Or so then people might suppress or distract themselves or something like that, to not allow that, the grief or the, whatever needs to come up. Have you had any experience with that?
Well, I can just acknowledge that, we live in a society that doesn't really invite emotion into life or recognize the wisdom in it. And, for many people, there are messages around, don't cry, and so just to have deep compassion for like how educated we are in certain ways not to trust emotions, not to trust our body. Um, but I do think it's like, little by little, it's like building that capacity of coming home to yourself. And I do think, for someone maybe who's never done any kind of mindfulness, any kind of yoga or spiritual practice, and to kind of drop into a powerful holotropic session, it might be a little intense, right? Because you do want to be held with care, right? Or to have support around how to to experience and to be held, I guess, because sometimes like it can really be a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I do. I think that is very important. Uh, so, Haley, maybe now we could pivot a little bit to the work you're doing now. And what I think is so fascinating to hear is you were a litigator. So, that's obviously a profession I was as well, that involves conflict. Now you're doing, you've trained in non conflict communication, and you work as a conscious communication trainer. So, I would love to hear, what drew you to this work and a little bit about what you're doing now.
Sure. I stumbled on this work actually through a reading it was a spiritual reading. And I asked, what are the skills I need to learn to serve the people I'm meant to serve?
Hmm.
And the the answer that came back was active listening and nonviolent communication. And I had never heard of nonviolent communication before. And it has now become the central focus of my life. And the first experience that I had was just so illuminating. It gave me so much clarity. Nonviolent communication it's both a consciousness and like a framework for communication. And the key insight of nonviolent communication is the centrality of needs, of universal human needs, that we are all driven to act in service of our needs, and that our feelings like indicate whether needs are being met or not met. So if we are experiencing some kind of unpleasant emotion, it's a sign that needs are not being met. So it also helped me embrace my emotions because I certainly didn't have a very strong, like a positive relationship with emotions. I really just ignored them because there are deadlines and work has to get done. But when I learned this connection that like feelings indicate needs, it gave me so much clarity and understanding for myself, which these are some of my highest values, and just a way of understanding the world and like what's going on between people. And right now, I'm working with individuals and organizations to help build that emotional awareness and to help them improve their listening and communication skills so they can connect and understand each other better and collaborate more effectively and navigate conflict with care.
Ah, that's amazing. It's really inspiring to hear you. And, when you shared about the connection between our emotions and needs, I was reminded of, sounds like what we both experienced when we were practicing lawyers. Some of the emotional things. Do you see a connection to unmet needs that you might have had during that time of your life when you were working as a litigator or any of the other types of practices you did?
Oh gosh, so much. I mean, remember one day coming home, I had like groceries from Trader Joe's. I had a work email to answer and I had to use the bathroom. And I was like, what should I do? Like, what's the most efficient order to do these things? I mean, I was just so disconnected from my body and just so like wrapped up in like, I have to be responsive that I didn't really even take care of like my basic like human, bodily needs. Much less like taking care for, certain other needs of like self-expression, right? For, did I really give focus for my like relationships, like for friendship or romantic relationships? Those things were really like put on hold because I was so prioritizing work, which did satisfy needs. I mean, it brought financial security. I did feel meaning. I felt belonging. I was contributing, and that all was really satisfying to me. But, the way I kind of prioritized those needs was like out of balance because I wasn't giving space for like nourishing my soul and nourishing my body, like through relationship, through time in nature, and various other things. Yeah.
I really resonate with what you're saying. And it's very interesting to me. I'm sure this happens in other professions, but especially I see it with a lot of lawyers, especially in large firms, but also in-house lawyers. It just depends on the role. But even those basic physical needs, like you said, like I have to go to the bathroom, or I can remember it's like years go by and you haven't been to the dentist, or you're like just these basic things that you're like, how am I going to find time for that? And then the needs we have, I have trained as a forest bathing guide and I love forest bathing and Shinrin Yoku. And that practice arose in Japan in the 80s because the government observed people getting more sick. And when they studied why, it was because they had been spending a lot more time in nature in the past, and then the culture had moved to being indoors mostly, so in houses and offices. And people, so there were illnesses, and now they say in Japan there are certain physicians that will write green prescriptions to go spend time, and that's what you actually need is, and the trees, their own immune systems produce chemicals that strengthen our immune systems. So it's like we are meant to live in that environment, and if you're working at a large law firm, maybe you've got kids too, and just modern life, like you maybe even those basic needs are not met.
Right. Wow, that's incredible, and really speaks to the power of nature. And I think, right, as humans, like we're meant to be connected to the earth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Mhm.
Totally. And yeah, so I love hearing about this. So I'm curious with your work in bringing NVC and conscious communication to organizations, that's so fascinating to me because a lot of, I work coaching individuals primarily, and they'll bring to me stuff that happens with their colleagues or their boss, the partner, the client. And if I don't have access to all those folks, I can't like necessarily coach them. So I'm just working with the one individual. But I would love to hear about your work bringing this to organizations and like what's possible when people really integrate this framework.
Yes, yeah. Well, I can share for some of the work that I did last fall. I was working with a group of mental health services organizations that serve Central Virginia. And so I was doing some of these workshops with their clinical staff, with management, and with some peer support specialists. And so we had different sessions on managing conflict, on empathic listening, of how to like manage group discussions and dynamics. And in our final session, we did some like debriefing, and people were sharing about how they were using these practices, especially around empathic listening, with their colleagues, like with their clients. And actually, one woman shared a story about how she then actually was using this at home. And it's such a sweet example. I would love to share it.
I would love to hear it.
So she was, interacting with her like 8-year-old son, and he was, in a bad mood. Something was going on, and the way NVC encourages empathic connection is to guess someone's feelings and needs. Are you feeling sad because you need affection, or because you need support, or because you need to be heard? So she made like a guess, and she said in the past, she was used to connecting with someone's feelings, but it was different for her to make a guess about the need that was behind the feeling. So for her 8-year-old son, she guessed, like, are you feeling sad because you need, I forget what she guessed, but he responded and he said, no, mommy, I need to feel loved. And, I was like really tearing up, and everyone else on the call was, and then, and then she asked if like, well, what would help you feel loved? And he said, for you to yell less. And she could really take it in, and it was so profound to think of the what's possible, right, to give space, especially for any child, and especially a boy, to be able to express his feelings, his needs, to feel safe, to express that, and to be received, and the acknowledgement of, we all share this need to be loved, right? And that she could then listen to, what would support you in feeling that way, and that she could take it in. So that's just like a little example of when we can, guess what's going on for someone, what their needs are, and it can take us to a different place of both connection with someone, and then in terms of, collaboration, or like what do we do then? It gives us some space to move into like a new creative possibility for how we can connect and interact in ways that meet needs, which ultimately serve life. And in Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of NVC, he was really desiring like, how can we make life more wonderful? And that's about how can we serve needs, because that's what connects us to life and connects us to everyone, because we are all sharing these same universal needs.
It's so beautiful. I love it. His book on NVC was part of my coach training, so you're bringing me back to when I would read it and I would listen to his lectures, listen to him talk, and he's so lovely to listen to. So I'm like, oh, it's so nice to be reminded of all this because it's been a while since I've visited NVC, and it's just such a beautiful framework and very powerful.
Yeah. And I
Um,
find it so meaningful. It brings me meaning, and it gives me hope, because I really see that these are skills also that we can learn. And I have certainly learned so much in terms of my fluency of feelings and needs and how I connect with myself, how I connect with others, gives me hope for the world that, it's in us. We can do this. We can create a world of connection where we can seek to meet each other's needs.
And I have to ask, not to be devil's advocate, but I really would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think gets in the way of this?
I mean, some of it is certainly the examples, the education, like what we're seeing out there in the world is a very different paradigm, is a very different way of communicating, a different consciousness. And I also think at the heart of it, there's something around scarcity that, there's a lot of scarcity thinking and fear in the world of like, there's not enough for me. And so then it's hard to then tap into that natural place of wanting to give and to contribute to others if we're worried there's not enough for me or for my people. So I think that is like a fundamental like mindset and belief that I don't believe is true, right? And I think that gets in the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's pretty powerful. So Haley, where can our listeners find out more about you and your work? And I know you offer also some training that I'm personally might be interested in taking myself, but I would love to hear about your offers and how people can connect.
Great. Well, I would be very happy to connect with people via LinkedIn, or I do have a website, HaleyMorrison.com, and Morrison is with two R's and two S's. So I'm very happy to connect with people via message, via email through my website, and I am, yeah, looking to do more like offerings also online to connect more broadly with people. Because it's a mix because I love what happens when people are present in person. And also, it's just an incredible medium that we have Zoom and we can connect. And I love connecting with people of diverse experiences from all around the world.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Haley, for spending this time with us. It's just been such a wonderful conversation, and there's so much wisdom that you share, and I'm just really grateful to you for being with me.
Thank you, Jesse, for having me on. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you.
So, to all of our listeners, we thank you so much. You have so much on your plate, and the fact that you carved out a half an hour to be with us today means a lot. So, thank you for spending this time with us. This is Returning to Soul, and we're so glad you're here. Until next time, be well.